Sometimes destiny knocks softly, and sometimes it dials your number by mistake. One woman picked up the phone expecting an ordinary call, but on the other end was a billionaire whose voice would change her entire world. What would you do if the love of your life arrived disguised as a wrong number? Life has a curious way of presenting us with opportunities wrapped in the most ordinary moments we usually overlook, dismiss, or label as inconveniences. We tend to believe that breakthroughs come from carefully crafted plans, strategic decisions, or grand, dramatic events. Yet, more often than not, the universe works quietly. It nudges us, lightly taps on our shoulders, or dials our number entirely by mistake. This idea becomes beautifully clear when we consider the story of a woman who answered a wrong number, just a simple mistake. A moment of mild confusion, and found herself stepping into a connection that would later reshape her world. But the deeper message beneath this scenario is universal. Opportunities rarely look like opportunities at first glance. They look like interruptions. They look like accidents. They look like the kind of moments we brush off, ignore, or quickly rush past because we're too focused on what we expect life to deliver. When she picked up the call, she wasn't expecting anything extraordinary. In fact, most people, upon realizing they're speaking to a stranger, wrap up the conversation in seconds. We are trained to be efficient, precise, and cautious, a mindset that makes sense in a structured world, but also blinds us to the beauty of spontaneity. Yet, because she decided to stay open for just a few seconds longer, she stumbled into something far greater than a casual conversation. She unlocked a path she never even knew existed. This is the nature of unexpected opportunities. They don't announce themselves with thunder or fireworks. They whisper. They slip into our lives disguised as mistakes, and only those who allow curiosity to guide them, even briefly, discover how powerful these seemingly insignificant moments are. Think about your own life. Think about the friendships you've built, the experiences you've had, the turning points that shaped you. How many of them began with something unplanned? A conversation you weren't supposed to have. A door you walked through by chance. A meeting you were late for. A person you bumped into. Human stories are woven from these tiny, unpredictable sparks. Yet we often forget this truth because we live in a world that encourages us to control everything: our time, our relationships, our environment. But the beauty of life is that it refuses to be fully controlled. Opportunities come in forms we don't recognize at first. They catch us off guard deliberately, because if they appeared in their true form as challenges, as risks, as invitations, we might say no. We might hesitate. We might fear what would happen next. That's why many of the most meaningful opportunities in life don't ask for permission. They simply arrive. A wrong number became a doorway not because it was meant to be one, but because she allowed it to be. This is a crucial difference. Two people can experience the same moment. One sees it as an annoyance, the other as a possibility. She chose curiosity over impatience. She chose openness over dismissal. She chose to explore a moment that could have easily ended before it began. And that choice opened a bridge between two completely different worlds, hers and the billionaire's. It is easy to assume that such a connection is purely romantic or dramatic, but the deeper significance lies in the reminder that great opportunities don't always appear grand. They often start quietly, testing whether we are willing to step beyond habit and routine. Unexpected opportunities challenge us. They force us to pause and reconsider our assumptions. They break us out of the predictable rhythms we build around ourselves. But most importantly, they expand us. They stretch our perception of what's possible. They remind us that life still has the capacity to surprise us, no matter how structured or ordinary our days may feel. This wrong number moment also represents something more profound. The idea that opportunity is not always something we chase. Sometimes it is something that finds us. In a world obsessed with hustle, ambition, and relentless forward motion, we forget that some of the most transformative moments are not earned through effort, but discovered through openness. Being receptive emotionally, mentally, creatively is a skill far more powerful than being endlessly busy. The woman in the story wasn't searching for a connection, a lesson, or a new chapter. And yet, because she didn't shut the door too quickly, life showed her something unexpected. The billionaire wasn't searching for her, either. He, too, stumbled into something rare, something intriguing, simply because he allowed the moment to unfold rather than dismiss it. Unexpected opportunities are not always convenient. They don't always arrive when we feel ready, but they always arrive when they're meant to shift us, teach us, or open our eyes to something bigger than ourselves. And perhaps the most inspiring part of such moments is this: you don't have to prepare for them. You only have to be present enough, curious enough to recognize that even a wrong number can be the right moment, inviting you into a new story. Human connection is one of the most mysterious and magical forces in the world. It defies logic, ignores boundaries, and often blooms between people who seemingly have nothing in common. We are taught, consciously and unconsciously, to measure compatibility through similarities, similar backgrounds, similar social circles, similar lifestyles. Yet history, romance, friendship, and fate all remind us of one truth. Connection does not need permission from status, wealth, class, or circumstance. It forms where it wants to form, often between the most unlikely individuals. The story of the woman and the billionaire illustrates this beautifully. On the surface, they lived in two completely different universes. One lived a life defined by ordinary routines, modest comforts, and a steady understanding of the world around her. The other lived in a world where wealth shaped every decision, every environment, every expectation. He was surrounded by luxury, influence, and privilege, a stark contrast to the simplicity and predictability of her daily life. By society's standards, these two people should never have crossed paths. Their circles didn't overlap. Their lifestyles didn't match. Their experiences were worlds apart. And yet, the moment they started speaking, something unexpected happened. A connection, fragile at first, then growing stronger, formed between them. It didn't matter that he was a billionaire. It didn't matter that she was an ordinary woman with an ordinary life. What mattered was the authenticity in their voices, the curiosity in their conversations, and the comfort they found in simply talking to one another. Genuine connection has a remarkable way of ignoring the superficial lines we draw between each other. At night, when the calls continued, the differences between their worlds became less important. Stripped of surroundings, stripped of appearances, stripped of social expectations, they were just two human beings sharing stories, laughter, thoughts, and emotions. In the quiet of their conversations, their backgrounds mattered far less than the honesty they exchanged. This is the thing most people forget. Connection doesn't require sameness, it requires openness. Empathy, a willingness to listen, a willingness to be seen. We often underestimate how powerful these simple qualities are. In a world obsessed with labels, rich, poor, elite, ordinary, educated, uneducated, privileged, struggling, we forget that none of these labels define the heart. None of them decide who we can bond with. The human soul recognizes familiarity based on emotions, not titles. Two people can have completely different lives, yet share a deep understanding of each other simply because their hearts speak a similar language. Their connection wasn't built on material things. It wasn't built on lavish gifts, grand gestures, or glamorous settings. It was built on voice, vulnerability, and moments that felt real. In fact, the contrast between their worlds made their connection stronger because each brought something new, something refreshing, something the other had never experienced before. She offered him something money could never buy: sincerity, a grounded presence, a sense of normalcy he rarely encountered in a world full of people trying to impress, benefit, or please him. He didn't have to be the billionaire on those calls. He could simply be himself, without expectation or pressure. And in return, he offered her a window into a world she had never imagined. Not the wealth itself, but the perspective, the insights, the ambition, the intensity of someone who had fought battles she'd never seen. Through him, she glimpsed a version of life that was unfamiliar yet fascinating. Their differences became bridges, not barriers. Human beings often assume that mismatched backgrounds create incompatibility. But in reality, mismatched backgrounds often spark the deepest connections because they allow each person to discover new parts of themselves through the other. Connection thrives on contrast just as much as similarity. What matters is not where two people come from, but whether they are willing to meet each other in the middle in a space that is honest, open, and emotionally real. Their nightly calls became that space, a place where the billionaire wasn't defined by his fortune, and the woman wasn't defined by her simplicity. They met as equals, two people seeking companionship, understanding, warmth. In that vulnerable space, social status melted away. What remained were two hearts learning how to speak to each other. This reminds us of something profound. Emotional chemistry cannot be bought, predicted, or manufactured. It either exists or it doesn't. And when it does, it doesn't care who you are, what you earn, or where you come from. Connections like these challenge societal expectations. They remind us that relationships, whether romantic or otherwise, don't thrive on matching backgrounds. They thrive on matching souls. They also remind us to look beyond appearances. Behind every billionaire is a human being with fears, dreams, regrets, and desires. Behind every ordinary person is a depth of experience, wisdom, and resilience that wealth cannot overshadow. In a world increasingly divided by class, status, and material differences, their story becomes a simple yet powerful reminder. Every human heart beats the same. Every person, no matter how wealthy or ordinary, longs for understanding, companionship, and emotional truth. And the most unexpected connections are often the most meaningful precisely because they cross boundaries we never thought could be crossed. Curiosity is often seen as a simple trait, a mild interest, a passing thought, a small desire to know more. But in reality, curiosity is one of the most powerful forces shaping our lives. It is the spark that ignites transformation, the quiet inner voice that pushes us toward growth, and the invisible bridge that connects us to the unknown. Without curiosity, nothing new would ever enter our world. No discoveries, no innovations, no relationships, no unexpected stories like the one that began with a wrong number. When she answered the call that night, she didn't have a plan. She wasn't expecting anything unusual, yet something inside her, a gentle curiosity, made her stay on the line a little longer. She could have ended the call immediately, like most people do when they realize they're speaking to a stranger. But there was something intriguing about the voice on the other end. Something unusual in the way the moment unfolded. Instead of dismissing the unfamiliar, she leaned into it. Curiosity doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it nudges us toward a small choice, a choice that seems irrelevant at the time but ends up shaping the course of our lives. Her curiosity became that small but significant choice. It opened a door she didn't know existed. It gave her a glimpse into a life far removed from her own. And, more importantly, it gave her a chance to discover something new within herself. Many people misunderstand curiosity. They see it as risky or unnecessary. They assume that staying within the boundaries of what they know keeps them safe. But safety and growth rarely live in the same space. Growth demands exploration. It requires stepping into the unfamiliar, asking questions, and accepting that not everything in life needs to make sense at first. Curiosity is the courage to say, what if this moment means something, even when logic tells you it doesn't? The billionaire on the other end of the line also felt this curiosity. For someone constantly surrounded by predictability, luxury, and routine expectations, the accidental call was refreshing. It was real. It was unscripted. And something about her voice, her honesty, or perhaps the unexpected nature of the moment awakened a curiosity within him too. Why did he want to keep talking? Why did a stranger's presence feel more calming, more grounding than the familiar chaos of his elite world? Curiosity, allowed two people from separate universes to discover unexpected familiarity in each other. It allowed them to break past assumptions and let their conversations run freely without fear or judgment. In those nightly calls, curiosity was not just a feeling, it was the fuel that kept their connection alive. It made them ask questions, share stories, laugh at small coincidences, and explore deeper parts of themselves. Curiosity is the first step toward understanding, and understanding is the foundation of growth. Through their conversations, she learned about his world, a world shaped by responsibility, power, and pressure. She realized that wealth does not protect a person from loneliness or longing, and he learned about her world, a world filled with routine, but also sincerity, struggle, and resilience. He discovered that simplicity could carry a beauty he rarely felt in his own life. This mutual discovery did more than entertain them. It expanded them. Curiosity stretches the boundaries of who we think we are. It opens us to perspectives we might never consider. It deepens our emotional intelligence. It leads us into moments that challenge our fears, our assumptions, and even the identities we cling to. When we follow our curiosity, we begin to grow not because something forces us to change, but because we allow ourselves to be changed. The woman, by choosing to stay curious instead of shutting the door on a stranger, allowed herself to experience a connection that broadened her sense of possibility. And the billionaire, by choosing curiosity over distance, allowed himself to step out of the polished perfection of his life and rediscover genuine human warmth. Curiosity also teaches us humility. It reminds us that we do not know everything, and that there is always something more to learn about people, about ourselves, about life. It invites us to listen instead of assume, to explore instead of judge. It softens the walls we build around ourselves, walls made of fear, comfort, or routine. So often in life, people stop growing not because they reach their limits, but because they stop being curious. They stop asking questions. They stop welcoming the unexpected. They stop believing that something new, something meaningful, could still find its way into their world. But curiosity keeps us open. It keeps us alive. It keeps us connected to the magic of possibility. The wrong number wasn't special by itself. What made it extraordinary was the curiosity that followed the willingness to see where the moment might lead rather than shutting it down out of habit or caution. Curiosity transformed a mistake into a conversation into a connection, and a connection into something meaningful. And in life, that is how every great journey begins, with a curious mind willing to step into the unknown, even if just for a moment. Courage is often imagined as something dramatic, a heroic leap, a bold declaration, a life-changing risk. But real courage shows up far more quietly. It hides in small decisions, in moments so subtle we barely recognize their impact until much later. In the story of the woman who answered the wrong number, courage didn't look like a grand act. It looked like staying on a call she never expected. It looked like allowing a conversation with a stranger to unfold. It looked like choosing openness over fear. Most people think courage is something you summon when facing danger, but courage is also needed in everyday life, especially when stepping into unfamiliar situations. It takes courage to give something new a chance. It takes courage to let your guard down, even a little, and it takes courage to allow an unexpected moment to become meaningful. When she heard the unfamiliar voice on the phone, she could have ended the call instantly. It would have been the practical thing to do, the safe thing, the socially expected thing, but she didn't. Something inside her, a quiet, instinctive bravery, encouraged her to stay, to speak, to explore the moment. The conversation that followed wasn't extraordinary at first. It was simple, yet courage often begins with simple choices. Her courage didn't roar, it whispered, and that whisper was enough to change the course of her life. Courage is not always dramatic. Sometimes it's a gentle willingness to see what happens if you don't walk away too quickly. Think about how many moments we miss because we choose fear over possibility. Fear tells us to stick to what we know. Fear tells us to avoid anything unfamiliar. Fear convinces us that anything unpredictable is dangerous, but courage reminds us that unpredictability is often where the best parts of life lie. When the calls continued, she allowed the conversations to grow deeper. She shared parts of herself, her humor, her thoughts, her stories, and that sharing required vulnerability. Vulnerability is courage in its purest form. It means offering pieces of yourself without knowing how they will be received. It means being honest when it would be easier to be guarded. It means letting someone see you, not just hear you. For him, too, courage played a role. Being a billionaire meant he lived in a world where people approached him with agendas, expectations, or admiration. Sincerity was rare. Authenticity was even rarer. Yet in these nightly calls, he found himself letting down walls he didn't even realize he had built. He spoke openly, honestly, without the polished image or the curated confidence he was used to presenting. It took courage for him to trust a stranger with his real thoughts. It took courage to enjoy a connection that didn't match the rules of his elite world. It took courage to continue a conversation born out of a mistake most wealthy, busy people would have brushed aside. The courage between them didn't come from big gestures. It came from consistency, from choosing, night after night, to return to the conversation. From choosing to keep calling, from choosing to answer. Each call was an act of bravery, a willingness to keep exploring something that made no logical sense but felt undeniably real. Courage transforms ordinary interactions into extraordinary experiences because it pushes us beyond what we already know. It teaches us that the familiar is comfortable, but the unfamiliar is transformative. It invites us to step outside the boundaries of routine and allow something new to enter our lives. People often underestimate how courage affects relationships, not just romantic ones, but all human connections. Every time you open up, every time you listen deeply, every time you let someone matter to you, you are practicing courage. It's far easier to stay emotionally distant. It's far easier to protect yourself with silence, indifference, or caution. But courage is what creates meaning. Courage is what allows depth. Courage is what turns a moment into a memory. In her case, courage allowed her to discover a connection she never expected. It allowed her to break the invisible barrier between her simple world and his extravagant one. It allowed her to step into a story that didn't seem possible for someone like her. And the billionaire's courage allowed him to experience something rare, a connection untouched by wealth, status, or expectation. Courage also means trusting yourself, trusting your instincts, trusting that sometimes your heart recognizes something before your mind understands it. When she stayed on that first call, she trusted a feeling she couldn't explain. When he called again, he trusted a curiosity he couldn't ignore. Courage doesn't always give you certainty. It gives you permission to move even without certainty. The truth is this: extraordinary moments are hidden inside ordinary choices. A decision that takes 2 seconds can open a chapter that changes your entire life. Courage turns those small decisions into opportunities. The story of a wrong number becoming a nightly connection is not just about romance, it's about how bravery shapes destiny. It's about how stepping out of comfort zones leads to discoveries. It's about how allowing yourself to be open, just a little, invites the extraordinary to enter your ordinary life. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to look beyond fear, and sometimes that choice is as simple as staying on the line when life calls you unexpectedly. People often talk about fate as if it's something magical, a cosmic force, a destined plan, a grand, invisible script guiding our lives. We imagine fate as a dramatic event. 2 people locking eyes across a crowded room, a twist in the storyline of life that feels orchestrated by the universe itself. But what we overlook is that fate often operates in the simplest, most practical ways. It doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes, fate sits quietly inside a moment that looks completely ordinary or even accidental. The wrong number in this story is a perfect example. Nothing about it seemed mystical at first. It was just a misdial, a tiny human error. a moment that most people would correct and move on from in seconds. Yet that one small mistake became the hinge on which an entirely new story turned. The point is not that the universe forced them together, but that fate can express itself through the everyday mechanics of life. When we think of fate, we tend to imagine destiny as something supernatural. But destiny can be incredibly practical. It works through timing, through coincidence, through simple decisions that align in unexpected ways. Fate is not always a magical event. Sometimes it is the result of people being in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing without even realizing it. The billionaire misdialed. Something so basic, so ordinary. Yet why did he stay on the call longer than he needed to? Why did she? Why did the moment not dissolve the way wrong numbers usually do? There is something fascinating about how fate weaves itself between logic and possibility. It uses the natural flow of life, the routines and mistakes of human behavior, to create openings for connection, growth, and transformation. Many times, we fail to recognize fate because it looks too simple. We expect the extraordinary to announce itself, but often, the extraordinary hides inside the ordinary. Fate isn't always loud. It doesn't need to reveal itself dramatically. Sometimes, it simply nudges two paths together and waits to see what the people involved will do next. And this is the practical side of fate. It requires participation. Fate creates the opportunity, but we must choose to step through it. She could have ended the wrong number call instantly. He could have apologized and hung up. If either of them had done what was expected, the entire story would have ended before it began. This is what makes fate practical. It depends on human decisions, human openness, human willingness to explore a moment that makes no sense yet somehow feels important. We often think fate is predetermined, but perhaps fate is more like a puzzle, offering us pieces we can either use or ignore. A misdial is a small piece. A willingness to stay on the line is another. Curiosity adds another. Openness adds another. And slowly, piece by piece, a picture forms a picture that would never have existed if either person dismissed the moment as meaningless. This is the practical beauty of fate. It reveals itself only when we allow it to. The billionaire, who lived in a world structured by schedules, assistants, obligations, and expectations, stumbled into a moment that broke his routine. Fate didn't need to create a miracle, it simply let something ordinary interrupt his extraordinary life. And in that interruption, something human entered the space, something real. The woman who lived a life shaped by predictability and simple rhythms answered a call that didn't belong to her. Fate didn't create a dramatic sign for her either. It simply placed an unexpected voice in her path. What made the moment matter was her decision not to dismiss it. This reveals an important truth. Fate and free will are partners, not opposites. Fate presents possibilities, but free will decides whether those possibilities become reality. The world we live in is filled with practical mechanisms: phone numbers, traffic lights, schedules, emails, routines, timing. Fate uses these mechanisms. It doesn't need to break the rules of life to change our lives. It simply needs to rearrange the ordinary in a way that reveals the extraordinary hidden inside it. Think about all the chances in your own life, the people you've met unexpectedly, the opportunities that appeared out of nowhere, the moments that never should have happened but did. None of them required magic. They required timing. They required one small choice that led to another. They required you to be there, in that moment, making that decision. Fate is not always a dramatic force. Sometimes, it is the alignment of practical circumstances. A seat you choose, a call you answer, a message you send, a delay that changes your route, a conversation that begins accidentally, a tiny decision that becomes meaningful later. These are the quiet tools fate uses to guide our lives. And the wrong number was one of those tools: simple, ordinary, practical. Yet from that practicality emerged a connection that neither of them could have planned, predicted, or orchestrated. This is what makes fate so fascinating. It works naturally, not magically. It blends into the rhythm of life so smoothly that we often don't notice it until the moment has already grown into something bigger. Fate doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply waits for us to notice. And when we do, everything changes. In a world that often feels busy, heavy, and routine-driven, it becomes easy, almost natural, to close our hearts. We protect ourselves from disappointment, from uncertainty, from risks we think we cannot afford to take. We build emotional walls without even realizing it, telling ourselves that we're being practical, mature, or responsible. Yet every great story in life begins with one simple thing: an open heart. Keeping your heart open to possibilities does not mean being careless. It means being receptive to the unexpected. It means allowing life to show you something new without assuming the outcome. And perhaps more importantly, it means believing that something meaningful can still find you, even when you're not actively searching for it. The story of the woman who answered a wrong number is a perfect example of how possibilities enter our lives quietly, subtly, and without warning. She didn't wake up that morning expecting anything unusual. She wasn't looking for excitement or change. Yet when the call came, a call that logically should have meant nothing, her open-heartedness turned it into something extraordinary. If she had been closed off, dismissive, or uninterested, the moment would have ended in seconds. But an open heart sees opportunity where a closed heart sees inconvenience. An open heart pays attention. It listens. It gives space to moments that feel different, even if those moments aren't fully understood yet. Keeping your heart open means trusting that life still has surprises waiting for you. For the billionaire, keeping an open heart was equally important, perhaps even more difficult. People who live in fast-paced, high-pressure environments often develop emotional armor. They learn to protect themselves from insincerity, from judgment, from being taken advantage of. Their world becomes structured, controlled, predictable. But openness is the opposite of control. It requires vulnerability. It requires letting go. The billionaire could have ignored the connection, treating the situation as a meaningless error. But something about the conversation called to him, and instead of shutting down the feeling, he allowed it space to grow. Keeping his heart open meant stepping beyond logic, beyond routine, beyond expectations. It meant letting a stranger matter. In their nightly conversations, both of them practiced openness without even realizing it. They shared details, laughed freely, asked questions, admitted uncertainties. This kind of emotional exchange is only possible when two hearts are open. A closed heart cannot build depth, no matter how frequent the interaction. But an open heart invites honesty, warmth, and connection. Keeping your heart open to possibilities doesn't always result in romance. Sometimes it results in friendship, sometimes in opportunity, sometimes in personal growth. But it always results in expansion, an expansion of your understanding, your experiences, your world. Your emotional capacity. One of the greatest tragedies of life is how many moments people miss simply because they choose to stay closed. They assume the unknown is threatening. They assume anything unexpected is a problem. They assume emotional openness is weakness. But every meaningful moment in life, every love, every friendship, every breakthrough begins with someone believing that something good might come from something new. An open heart allows you to explore. It allows you to listen deeply. It allows you to believe in possibilities beyond your current reality. And most importantly, it allows you to receive what life is trying to give you. The wrong number in this story was not special by itself. What made it meaningful was the openness with which both individuals approached it. She didn't assume the moment was useless. He didn't assume the connection was impossible. They both allowed themselves to be surprised, and surprise is something only open hearts can experience. Think of how often people close themselves off because of past hurts, disappointments, or fears. They tell themselves they're protecting their peace, when in reality, They're shutting out the very experiences that could heal them, inspire them, or transform them. Keeping your heart open is not about ignoring the past, it's about refusing to let the past limit your future. Life has a way of offering opportunities that don't look like opportunities at first. They look like accidents, like interruptions, like wrong numbers. Keeping your heart open means giving these moments a chance to show you what they truly are. Openness also allows growth within relationships. The woman and the billionaire came from different worlds, yet their connection grew because they allowed it to. They didn't restrict themselves with assumptions or judgments. They stayed open to learning from each other, understanding each other, and experiencing something completely outside their comfort zones. A closed heart would have rejected the unfamiliar. An open heart embraced it. Keeping your heart open also requires faith, not blind faith, but gentle faith. The belief that life is not finished offering you good things. The belief that you deserve connection. The belief that surprises can still lead to joy. This kind of faith is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet, soft, steady, but incredibly powerful, because the truth is, possibilities are always around us. They appear in conversations, in unexpected encounters, in fleeting moments that most of us walk past. When your heart is open, you notice these possibilities, you welcome them, and sometimes they become the story you never expected but always needed. Keeping your heart open doesn't guarantee that every moment will lead somewhere, but it guarantees that you will never miss the moments that could change your life. If you want, I can turn all 6 expanded key points into a full speech or a full chapter style narrative. So in the end, this story is not merely about a wrong number or a billionaire or a series of unexpected late night conversations. It is a reminder, a powerful one, that life is constantly speaking to us. Sometimes it whispers through intuition, sometimes it nudges us through coincidence, and sometimes it rings loudly through a moment that feels completely accidental. But what truly shapes our destiny is not the event itself. It's how we respond to it. She could have ignored the call. She could have dismissed the voice. She could have stayed within the boundaries of the life she already understood. But instead, she chose to stay curious, to remain open, to let her heart explore something unfamiliar. And in doing so, she discovered a connection that transcended wealth, status, and expectation. A connection born from sincerity, from courage, and from the simple willingness to listen. And maybe that is the real lesson for all of us. That fate does not always demand grand gestures. Sometimes it only asks that we pick up the phone, open the door, or say yes to a moment we don't yet understand. Because the truth is, the greatest chapters of our lives seldom begin with certainty. They begin with a spark, small, accidental, often inconvenient but capable of lighting an entire horizon, if we are brave enough to follow it. So as we walk forward into our own lives, may we all carry this reminder. Stay open to unexpected conversations. Stay willing to rewrite your story. And never, ever underestimate the quiet power of a single moment. A moment that might arrive not as a miracle, but simply as a call, one you never planned to answer, but one that changes everything.